Church hurt is something we often talk about, but usually from one perspective, the pew. We acknowledge the pain of members. We recognize the wounds people carry. But what about the pastor? In this new series, Pastor Gaddis reminds us that the pew doesn't have the monopoly on church hurt. Pastors experience pain too. They face disappointment, criticism, and wounds that cut deep, yet they don't always have the option to step away. They still have to preach, still have to teach, still have to pray, still have to show up and lead, even while hurting. This episode opens up an honest conversation about the unseen side of ministry, where calling meets pain and faithfulness means continuing the assignment even when the heart is wounded. So lean in. This is The Pew Doesn't Have the Monopoly on Church Hurt.
Hey guys, welcome to Pastors Are People Too. Real pastors, real talk, and real partnership. I'm Teron V, Gaddis, pastor, author, and national leader for Praying for Our Pastors Fellowship. And tonight, I need you to lean in on this one, because what we are about to talk about affects the health of the pulpit and the future of the church. This is not just another episode you listen to and move on from. This is one of those conversations that, if we get it right, it changes how pastors lead. If we get it right, it changes how people respond to leadership. Pastor, this one's for you, because there are some things you're carrying that you were never meant to carry alone. There are some things you are carrying that you've never said out loud, not because you didn't feel it, but because you didn't feel safe to say it. And if we are not careful, and if we don't create a place for this, you will keep leading publicly while hurting privately. Church, those ones that love your church and love your pastor, this one's for you too. Because if you only see your pastor on Sunday, you're only seeing part of his story. And if you don't understand what they are carrying, you can unintentionally add weight to what is already heavy. And here's why that matters right now. Because we don't just need better sermons, we need healthier shepherds. We don't just need growing churches, we need supported leaders. Because when the pastor is strengthened, the church is strengthened. And if this is your first time listening, you didn't just find a podcast randomly. You stepped into a necessary conversation, one that brings pastors and people together, not in pressure, but in partnership. So come on, lean in, because tonight we're stepping into something the church needs. Not just honesty, but healing. So for the next few weeks, we're going to be talking and walking through this series. The pew doesn't have a monopoly on church hurt. One more time. The pew doesn't have a monopoly on church hurt, because the pain is not limited to a particular place. And in this case, I'm referring to the pew. Pain also lives in the pulpit. And tonight, we start here. What do you do when what you've been called to is what's cutting you? What do you do when what you've been called to is cutting you? You know, as we move into this conversation, I want to do my best to paint a picture for you. The final amen has just been given. The pastor steps down from the pulpit, walks to the back like he always does, and people are coming by saying, good word, Pastor. Pastor, I needed that word today. Pastor, God really used you today. And then one man steps up. No smile, no greeting, and no grace. He starts tearing into the message. Point by point, line by line, tone, delivery, and direction. Right there in the open, the pastor stands there, trying to process, trying to respond, trying to hold it together. And before he can even gather his thoughts, another voice steps in and says, "What are you doing?" The man responds without hesitation, "I have the spiritual gift of nitpicking. It's my job to humble the preacher." And the response comes back strong. "That's not spiritual. That's bullying. That's not spiritual. That's bullying." And here's the truth. That matters. That moment is not rare. This is a true story, by the way. It's just not always public, because what many people don't see is this. Public ministry often comes with private anguish. Public ministry often comes with private anguish. Sunday morning, the room is full. Worship is high. Hands are lifted. Voices are raised. The pastor walks up in he or her black pastoral robe, Bible ready, voice ready and steady, and the people see strength. They see confidence. They see clarity. They see conviction. But what they don't see is the conversation earlier that week that cut deep. What they don't see is the message that questioned everything. But what they don't see is the meeting that shifts the room, the pressure that never lets up. The criticism that comes from not from outsiders, but for insiders. And yet, Sunday still came. So pastors still stand, they preach, they pray, they pour out. And nobody knew. They were leading and bleeding at the same time. Pastor, you helped everybody else. You encouraged everybody else. You strengthened everybody else, but never had space to process what hurt you. And here's the tension. Because you're called, so quitting isn't an option. You know, I know as pastors, we see members come and we see members go when things don't go that way. But you and I both know, Pastor, that we're called. So quitting isn't an option. But bleeding is still a reality. So let's say it clearly. The pew does not have a monopoly on church hurt. Let's just say it together. Let's put it on the table. Let's address the elephant in the room. The pew does not have a monopoly on church hurt. Pastors get hurt too. Not just by life, not just by circumstance, but sometimes by the very people they're called to serve. And that's the part nobody prepares you for. They don't teach it in seminary. They don't teach it at congresses or Christian education. They don't teach you all of those things. But part of this is that we got to deal with that the people that we are called to serve sometimes hurt us the worst. Because all of us, we expect pressure from outside. We expect resistance from the world. We expect opposition from darkness, but you don't expect wounds to come from the place you poured in the most. You don't expect the cut to come from the people you prayed for. You don't expect the weight to come from the same hands you've been trying to lift. Sometimes it's not loud. Sometimes it's just subtle. It's the constant criticism that never comes with encouragement. It's the expectation, the huge expectation that we have to walk around with it that never comes with understanding. The silence when support is needed. Sometimes it's loud. It's words that cut deeper than they should. Sometimes it's loud. Emails that question your motives and questions your heart. Sometimes it's loud. Conversations that dismiss your calling. Sometimes it's loud. Moments that make you wonder, did they really hear anything I said? Or were they just waiting to respond? And here's what makes it heavy. You can't just walk away. I feel you, Pastor. I understand where you are. You can't walk away from a place God called you. Because you're not dealing with a job. You're dealing with a calling. You're not just connected by responsibility. You are connected by assignment. So even when it hurts, you still show up. You still preach. You still pray. You still lead. And that creates a tension. You love the people. But sometimes the people hurt you. You love those people. But sometimes the very people that you invested the most energy into hurt you. You're called to feed them. But while you're feeding them, you never thought that they would cause you to bleed. And if we don't talk about this, if you and I don't acknowledge this, then pastors will keep doing what they've always done, smiling in public while struggling in private, preaching with power while still carrying pain, leading others forward while trying to hold them together. And that's why this matters. That's why pastors are people to matter. That's why we're talking about this idea of that the pew doesn't have a monopoly on hurt. Because many pastors are hurt, they're hurting, or they're on their way into being hurt. Because we need to understand it matters. Because ignoring it doesn't heal it. We've done that for centuries now. Silencing it doesn't remove it. Pretending that it's not there doesn't make it go away. But when you name it, now we can bring that to God when we name it. Now we can be healed. Now we can grow. Now we can lead without losing ourselves in the process. Pastor, don't carry just sermons. They carry scars. And if you're going to strengthen the church, we have to care for one another. We have to care for the ones who carry both. Let me name it honestly. It's not the disagreements. It's spiritual bullying, criticism without compassion, correction without relationship, expectation without support, pressure without prayer. And over time, that kind of weight does something to a person. Hebrews 13:7 says, leaders are watching over souls. But it also says, and let them do it with joy and not groaning. Which means this, ladies and gentlemen, you can either be a source of joy or you can be a source of weight. Either you can be a great encouragement or the greatest disappointment. Well, this episode deals with the fact that sheep sometimes wound. The Bible's full. Let me give it to you like this. Moses led people out, but he was worn down by their complaints. God used him to split the sea. God used him to bring them through. God used him to lead them out of bondage. But, hear me well, the same people who shouted in deliverance turned around and murmured and grumbled in the wilderness. No water, no food, no direction, and the weight got so heavy that Moses cries out to God, saying, I am not able to carry this people alone. In other words, Moses said, the burden is too heavy for me. And listen, Pastor, that's not rebellion, that's exhaustion. Moses not only did it, but let me call another person. David, anointed king, but his own men spoke of stoning him. These weren't strangers. These were his men. The ones who fought with him the ones who followed him. But in the moment of loss, when everything was falling apart, the Bible says the people spoke of stoning him because they were bitter in soul. And David is standing there, anointed, called, chosen, but still targeted. Paul served the church while writing with tears because of pain. Paul, the church planner, Paul, the preacher of truth, Paul, the one who poured out his life, and yet he writes out of much affliction and anguish of heart and with many tears. Not because of the world, but because of the church. The very people he loved became a source of deep emotional weight. And this is Easter weekend, this is Resurrection weekend, so I can't leave out Jesus, Savior of the world, Shepherd of souls, came unto his own, and his own received him not. One betrayed him, one denied him, another abandoned him. And in the garden, he wrestles with the will of God, but also the weight of being left alone. And at the table, he breaks bread with his disciples, but also sits across from a betrayer. And before the crowd, he stands in perfect innocence, but is treated like the guilty. And on the cross, he bears the weight of sin, but also the reality of rejection. But where were they? Where were those that he fed with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread? Where were they? Those that he healed from leprosy? Where were they? Those who he opened eyes and unstopped deaf ears? Where were they? The ones that he raised from the dead? I just want to know, from sick beds, where he is carrying the weight of the sin of the world and yet having to deal with rejection. And don't miss what they have to say to us in common. I hear Moses and David and Paul and Jesus collectively saying they were called, they were all faithful, and they were all used by God. Still, they kept showing up while breaking down. They kept pouring out while they were running on low. They kept lifting others while feeling the weight. They kept leading while silently hurting. Still wounded in work, pressed by the call, hurt by the harvest, bleeding in burdens. So if you are a pastor, and you've ever felt the weight, if you ever questioned the moment, if you ever had preached through pain, if you ever had to lead broken and battered, if you ever had to preach hope while going through hell, you, pastor, are not alone. You, pastor, are not alone. You are not weak. You're walking in the footsteps of those God used greatly and who still felt deeply. Sometimes the greatest strain in ministry is not the assignment God gave you. It's managing the pain that comes with the people attached to it. And if Jesus, the perfect shepherd, was wounded by the very ones that he came to save, then we should not be surprised, should we? When those called to shepherd feel the weight of that same reality. You expect wolves to wound you, but got wounded by sheep. You expect outsiders to wound you, but it is the insiders. You expect wolves to hurt you, but got wounded by sheep. Now, here's where it gets real. Because the hardest part is not just pain, it's silence. Because as a pastor, you don't feel like you can say it. I've been there. You just feel like I just can't say it. Because I don't want to look weak. I don't want to lose trust. I don't want to lose them walking away. You don't want to be the one that disturbs the work. So you bury it. Keep preaching. You keep leading. You keep showing up. You keep visiting. You keep your calendar, but inside something starts to shift. Pace starts slipping. Perspective starts shifting. Pressures start settling in. Strength starts to drain. Patience starts to shorten. And strain starts to show. Because what is not processed doesn't disappear. Old folk, you say you can sweep all of it under the rug. Sooner or later, the rug is going to show. You can stack all of the skeletons in the closet, but sooner or later, there become too many skeletons to fit in the closet. Pastor, hear me. Pastor, hear this. Just because you're still standing doesn't mean that you're not bleeding. Ladies and gentlemen who sit in the pew Sunday after Sunday, hear this in love. If your pastor is always having to be strong for you, but never has space to be human, eventually you will receive ministry from a depleted space. It won't show up immediately. Hear me. It won't show up immediately. The message still will connect. The room will still respond. Everything still looks intact. The preaching still reaches. The church is still moving. Nothing on the surface looks broken. But something deeper begins to weaken. Because you cannot keep pouring from a place that keeps getting wounded and never has time to heal. You can't. Pastor, you can't. Ladies and gentlemen, we can't sit back and watch this. Because there's the reason right there where there is so much going on in ministry now. I know we like to jump and say it's sin and you're probably most of the time right that it's sin, but it's what's underneath the sinful conduct. Underneath it, have you ever asked yourself, underneath that, is that a person who has kept pouring out, who has been depleted, who people are still pulling at. Someone who had been wounded and never had the time to heal. What if the church was a safe place? What if the pastor was able to share without having to worry about the recourse or the repercussion? I wanted to sit there for a moment. We need to take a break. But before we take a break, I want to let you know when we come back, we're going to be talking about how to stay called without staying broken. How to stay called without staying broken. Stay with us.
Before we close today, we want you to know that this conversation is too important to rush. What we've shared is only the beginning of understanding the reality that pastors can experience hurt too, and still carry the responsibility to lead. Next week, we're going to continue this discussion and go even deeper into what it looks like to serve while wounded, and how both pastors and congregations can move toward healing together. So don't miss part 2 of this episode, The Pew Doesn't Have the Monopoly on Church Hurt, next Monday at 6 p.m.